Hi, I'm Leslie Ann Jones, and I'm the Director of Music Recording and Scoring at Skywalker Sound. And I'm also a recording engineer and mixer on the scoring stage. The job I'm currently doing now, I actually have two responsibilities. One is the administrative part of my job, which is managing the music studio, which involves not only booking the studio, but employee issues, hiring, budgets, purchasing of equipment, things like that. Because I have a technical background, my responsibilities are probably a little different than someone else that might have the same job in another studio. The other half of my job, of course, is to sit at the console and be a recording engineer and a mixer, which is also a little different. Most people don't have both jobs. But we only have the one music room here, so it's not like we do have a large complex, but the rest of the complex is devoted to sound for film. This is the only music room. So it's important, I think, that one person be able to have both jobs. I started out actually as a guitar player and singer in bands when I was a teenager, and eventually owned a PA. I inherited a PA from a band I was in. I bought it, the band split up, I had the PA. And, sort of went through about a year where I was trying to maintain my career as a guitar player, but I was self-taught. I hadn't really gone to school, and there were a lot of guitar players I really admired, and I never thought that I could be as good as they were. And at the same time, I started taking my PA and formed a company with a couple of friends, a couple of guys who had other PA equipment, and we started doing live sound. And it became apparent to me that I could sort of make this switch and take everything I had learned so far about music and kind of apply that to being a sound mixer, and had a lot of fun doing that, going out and doing live gigs. And this was many years ago. This was in the early 70s. Tascam had just come out with a Model 10 mixer, and which was about this big, and half-inch 4-track tape recorder, which was, the first time anybody could actually buy equipment like that and put it in their homes. And we had a home studio. And it just became clear to me that I could get in the beginning of that and really learn about that, and I had as much of an affinity for that as I did for playing guitar. So I stopped playing and just started doing sound. And but I never thought I was going to be a recording engineer. I always thought I was going to be a record producer and an artist manager. I wanted to be somebody like Peter Asher. When I was sort of during this period of time, Peter was managed and produced Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor, and I thought, well, that would be great to kind of be in the studio with them and be involved in the creative aspect, and also help manage their careers to help their records sell. So I thought the best way to do that was to learn something about being an engineer. But as things happen in our career, you never quite know which path is going to be, the thing that really kind of piques your interest and takes you along, and it could be something completely different than what you thought. So I was working for ABC Records at the time in the publicity department. They had a recording studio. I was, once again, pretty much self-taught, took a couple of the first 2 courses ever offered in Los Angeles for recording engineers, and then asked for a job at ABC Studios. And they said, Phil Kay, who was head of ABC at the time, and he was head of ABC Studios and went on to run the Sony Music Studios in Santa Monica. He was very kind and said, well, there aren't any women recording engineers, and ABC had a woman mastering engineer, but that, mastering engineers don't deal with clients that much. So he agreed to try it, and we see what happened. I was at ABC Studios for 3 years. I started out as a production engineer, which is basically making tape copies. And then there was a session that was going to come in with an outside client that wasn't signed to the record company and a new engineer. And the assistant that was assigned to the project didn't want to travel at the time the session was going to be, because he lived a little farther away. So they were looking for an assistant engineer, and I raised my hand, never having actually been an assistant engineer. So then I started assisting, and eventually I started doing records. I was helping out several other engineers, helping them mix, or if they were busy working on another project, I would start a project for them. I left ABC, came up here to Northern California, worked for 9 years at a studio at the Automat, was a recording engineer, independent, went to Capitol. Somewhere around, I mean, you know, this is somewhere around the 90 or 91, I guess. You know, I'd already been doing it for about 15 years. And I think it's because I have always been a staff person and not an independent. But I kind of just came to the realization that this was my career. Being a recording engineer, being a mixer, everything that entails, producing some records, was the career that I was in. That it wasn't really about hit records or how many top 10 singles I had, or, you know, making $2,500 a day, or, you know, whatever. It really wasn't about that. It was about the love of music and the career that I had, and showing up every day and doing the best work that I could. And you know, I just got very comfortable with it from that point on, and that's just kind of what I did. And I was no longer concerned about, you know, how I was working plenty of hours. God knows at Capitol I was doing 90-hour weeks, you know, more than anybody wants to know. So it wasn't about the work, and it wasn't about being popular. It's just that I think some people get on that fast track and think it's all about top 10 singles and, you know, being on everybody's A-list. And I was just having a great time, and I was glad people called me and wanted me to work on their records. And for some people, the epiphany for you might be that, gee, this isn't really what I want. There's something else going on here, and that happens a lot here at Skywalker. People get hired in for one job, and then they finally figure out what a sound designer does or what a sound effects editor does, and maybe they're particularly fluent in Pro Tools, and that's their entree into that, and all of a sudden the career that they thought they were going to have, because maybe they went to Full Sail or Berklee School of Music and they thought they were going to be a recording engineer doing music, but they end up getting hired in Central, watching, you know, making sure everything's okay on a mix, and then they're a sound designer, and, you know, the path can go anywhere. In a lot of cases, young women just don't know the opportunities that exist. And, you know, I mean, to be frank, the hours are long and the work's hard, and that's true for anyone. And I think that, you know, if you are a young girl or a woman in this field, that, you know, you do have to, you know, spend more time and try a bit harder to make your mark. I did not spend an enormous amount of time trying to prove myself and show that I could do something. And I just did what I could do. I asked a lot of questions. I got an enormous amount of support from people because of my willingness to want to learn more. I'd spent a lot of time with the guys in the tech room, even though I didn't have a clue from a technical standpoint. I still don't know, frankly, the difference between a capacitor and a resistor. But in my career, it hasn't really mattered. If I was going to if I was going to be more technically inclined, I would have probably learned that. But I spent a lot of time with the tech staff just finding out how things worked, understanding the way the studio worked, and wanting to be part of the recording sessions, and you know, trying to be as helpful as I could and learn as much as I could. And I think that that's what carried me forward in my career. And it had nothing to do with it. It had less to do with trying to prove myself than it had to do with trying to extend myself beyond what I thought I was capable of doing. And therefore, I was given more opportunities, perhaps, than other people might have been given, because perhaps they thought, you know, they were trying to, you know, prove.